Paresh sir, over to you.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to another episode of In Conversation with. This is a part of the CASI New York Knowledge Series. In the recent years, we have shifted from why to how. A few years back, there were a lot of discussions on the company's core reasons of being in existence. Is it only profit? Is it profit with a purpose? How much profit? How much purpose? What are we really intending to? Which stakeholders are we serving and all? But today, that is no longer the question. Today, every company understands that they need to have a unique positive impact on the society. So, profits and purpose, that is gone. We are addressing newer questions now. How do we make a greater impact? How do we create an impact which lasts longer, an impact which is sustainable? Those are the questions. We have so many other questions. How, how do we confront the purpose gap? How do we imbibe the CSR strategy in the core business strategy? How do we make sure that our CSR strategy is in line with the brand strategy? And the final question is, how do all the actors, all the players within the overall framework of sustainability work together? For instance, governments, NGOs, impact investors, companies, consultants, investors, shareholders, people at large, weaker minorities, stronger minorities. These are all stakeholders. So how do they all work together? These are really the questions that we have today. So the purpose of this knowledge series at CASI, we call it Knowledge at CASI New York, is to get executable advice. And we can only get executable advice from the people who are in the trenches, who are really working in this direction. My name is Paresh and I represent a company called as CASI New York. We are the world's largest platform for CSR and sustainability, education and volunteering. We are present across 52 countries now. We also have a reach of 3 million volunteers in India alone. With that, I welcome the panelists to the session. We have some big names with us. Mamta, the CEO of Bharti Foundation. Arpinder Singh, the partner of Ernst Young India. Mr. Nilay Ranjan, Head CSR, Vodafone. A friend, Malika, she's the founder of Care CSR and she's from Uzbekistan. We have Richa Pant, Head of CSR and Sustainability at L&T Finance. And last not the least, we have a young fund manager from a different business, but he's working on the impact funds. Chirag Mehta from Quantum Mutual Funds. I welcome all of you with that. And I hand over to Arpinder ji to please give us a keynote and start the session. Thank you very much, Arpinder ji.
Thank you so much, Paresh. I'll just share my screen.
Please.
I hope you can all see it.
Yes.
So thank you, Paresh, and thank you, everybody. I'll start with a little difference. Everybody on the panel is very reputed. They run a lot of CSR programs, foundations. Today, I'll talk a little bit about governance because I think that's very important in today's time and age. All of us read newspapers. We realize there's some issues. We need to make sure whatever we do has to be fully compliant. The regulators, enforcement agencies are closely looking at what we do. In light of that, that's the context of my conversation. These are some snapshots of news, and I've used them more as kind of what are the themes or issues I'm seeing, at least from a governance perspective. And I'm only talking about governance today. There are programs where the intended beneficiaries could be potentially ghost beneficiaries, where the actual benefit or value for a CSR program doesn't reach its logical conclusion. Now, that's not for all programs, so please don't misunderstand me, but it is a risk out there and it's a big risk. The second thing is, in the time of coronavirus or COVID, how companies are dealing with their CSR programs, how are they changing and adapting with technology, monitoring? You can't go out, make sure your programs are being held compliant. How are you changing? I think that's something which all of us or whoever is working in the CSR teams have to at least address or at least answer the question. Also, you've had cases where you have a call center set up across India where people are calling up people outside India. They're cheating them, talking about different corona cases. benefits, externalities. So people come up with very ingenious, fraudsters, whether it's in CSR or non-CSR programs, they're coming up with new ideas all the time. CSR funding is also critical. I'm sure a lot of you have CSR programs. You got to make sure that the proper programs have fundings from the right and appropriate places. If I can go to, section 150, 135, sorry. Section 135 very clearly talks about some of the do's and don'ts. And I think most of you who running CSR programs would be well aware of the rules. But basically, there's certain size of company. And I think if you look at the net profit of 5 crores or more during any financial year, I think most of you would be getting covered. What it requires is obviously a board level representation in a CSR committee. If you're obviously not a publicly listed company, then you don't really have an independent director, and then you have to obviously keep the committee without an independent director. But that committee and the structure of that committee is very critical. And obviously, I hope when the other panelists come in, they should talk a little bit about their experiences in setting up the committee and who drives it. Regular monitoring of the CSR is required. Obviously, a CSR policy is required before that, and all CSR activities have to be listed on a website. So they're very prescriptive requirements. The Institute of Company Secretaries has come out with a full guidance note on CSR, and I hope all of you have read it. If you have not read it, you can reach out to me through Paresh and Mitesh, and I'm happy to share it with you, but you must read it, because one bit is doing the activity, second is being aware of what compliances the law stipulates for you in that sense. And obviously, if a company fails to spend the CSR amount, the board has to specifically comment on it as a part of their board report. I'm sure all of you, future panelists, will have to comment on that. Obviously, a lot of the responsibility around CSR and the governance on CSR lies on a board. A lot of my fellow panelists are working in listed companies, etc. They'll realize the pressure and the oversight and transparency that they have to comply with. This was a survey we had done recently at EY, and I think the results were quite disturbing, because it said that 75% of the people who were polled said that their business did not really have a very tight governance structure or a definite policy. It was kind of one-off. In some cases, it could be a large company, but the business owner, CEO drives the agenda. There's not really a committee, or there's a committee, but it's not really effective. 65% said they did not have a defined due diligence policy for CSR implementation partners. What we also came across is that more than 70% of most CSR programs are run by implementation partners. Implementation partners are basically third parties who pretty much run it for you. Now, the question is, if you're not running a full due diligence policy like you would do in your own company around a dealer or a distributor or an oversight like that, then technically you're exposing yourself. 50% actually did not have any case management workflow or governance structure for reported or identified violations. So are you getting weekly reporting on what the CSR spend is? 33% actually said there was misrepresentation of the CSR funds. The money doesn't actually reach its intended benefit. The program has accounting issues. The expenses are not supported. Again, as I said, please don't misunderstand me. I'm sure a lot of programs are running well. This is just a poll. It's a perception. Now, you can take it or dismiss it. But I always tell people I interact with, and I've been doing forensic work for more than 15 years, and before that audit for 10 years. So I've worked for more than 25 years. You can make out from my gray hair like Paresh. But the fact is that there are issues and you have to obviously address them. And the biggest issue I find is the low involvement of senior management. So sometimes the best CSR programs are where the CEO or the group chairman is himself or herself involved. And I think the company spends a little bit of money around monitoring. If you don't monitor and you assume that, I've heard many people say that, it's a CSR program. We want to have less cost on admin and more cost in giving back. And I fully agree with that. But there is a certain percentage you have to have on monitoring to make sure at least a huge amount of slippages don't happen in your compliances. What are some of the takeaways? What are the key risks? I think organizations have to realign priorities. If COVID has happened, you need to relook at your policy. You need to relook at your monitoring. Everything should be relooked at. If you haven't done it, please do it, because everyone's doing that. I mean, think about all the money you may have spent on your CSR program the last few years. Equipment is lying there. Some funds are lying there. Books are lying there. Whatever is lying there, who's making sure your inventory of your CSR in the last few years which you spent is still there? Because no one's going out there and doing audits as we talk. So the key risks: risk of funding, conflict of interest, conflict of interest, bribery and corruption. Unfortunately, whether we like it or not, there is a perception that whenever you have a bribery risk or an FCPA risk, as we call it in the our governance world, somehow it lands up in CSR. Somehow, there's a CSR money given. Suddenly, 90% of the names and as implementation partners are genuine, and then suddenly you had a mom and pop shop, and that's where the slippage happens. Fictitious expenses, and any sort of anti-money laundering type issues. So CSR unfortunately has all of this around it, and it's a fairly unorganized market out there because you have NGOs, non-NGOs, but they're small companies where people want to do the right thing, which may not have ERP systems like big companies have. So the exposure is definitely more. So as a result, there's a double whammy. You have an unorganized market and weaker controls, and which may lead to issues. This is my last slide. So I'll end by saying you have a current COVID situation and you have a post-COVID situation. I think in the current COVID situation, all of you must see, what is the control and monitoring you can do with the money you're spending as of today. Because whatever you do today will come back and bite you 1 year later. Trust me, I'm an auditor. We'll come back to you 1 year later when COVID is not there, and we'll ask you, that what were you doing? If you keep saying, we didn't know, we didn't have oversight, that's too bad. If you didn't have oversight, you must put it down on paper right now. You must tell your management that I don't have oversight. There may be an issue happening. So you must cover yourself from a risk perspective even today, even though you're continuing to do your programs, you're continuing to help because the country does need help. More so today than ever before. You relook at your complete policy because things are not going to be back to the way it was earlier. Technology will become a must. You got to see how you can use technology, having more cost efficient programs, better monitoring, and maybe relook at some of the programs which you're doing today. So I think post COVID, of course, everything will change in my view. But at least in this current situation, don't keep your eyes closed. Don't assume that people will give you a rain check 1 year later when things are better. But I think that's it from me, Pareshi. I'm really looking forward to hearing the other speakers.
Thank you very much, Arpinder. That was a short but good presentation. One thing I will like to quote here from our discussion that we had earlier in your speech, which you mentioned very well in your speech, and I will quote that. Once the COVID situation is over, suddenly a lot of companies will realize that they have been spending money on apparatus, doctors, medicines, and they have not been visiting those rural places where they are sending those apparatus or equipments or medicines. And there is a big chance of issues, embezzlements, and ethics or governance issues. So yes, this particular time, this particular day, the CSR heads and the CSR managers need to be very, very careful because the auditors will be there. So that is something which you taught me in your session earlier. And I thought it would make sense to repeat that in front of all the CSR heads.
Thank you so much, Pareshi. I fully agree. I hope.
Right. So I will throw open questions to the panel, and anyone from the panel can answer, and the next person can take over from that person. I have a few questions, basic questions. What are the issues faced while running a CSR program? What are the while running a CSR program and while execution? So, what are the execution challenges that you face when you run a CSR program? And it's an open question, please.
So,
Nilay ji or Mamta ji.
Should I speak? I
Oh,
heard
please,
some.
please, absolutely.
I thought I would cover it when I am making my remarks, but I'll talk about it in any case. I don't know how many of you know that Bharti Foundation has its own schools, Satya Bharti schools. We have 183 of them, 5 being senior secondary, and most of them primary element. And they're in the villages. Now, that means, and these are all free schools for underprivileged children. I mean, given the fact that over 75% of our children come from, the scheduled underprivileged categories, 50% of them are girls. Our field teams make an effort to make sure that the bottom of the pyramid, underprivileged children come into our schools because these schools are absolutely free of cost. A child just has to walk in, Not only there isn't any fees, we also give them midday meal, notebooks, textbooks, uniform, anything that a child needs. So basically what we've done is we've removed any barrier that a poor, underprivileged child may face and therefore not attend the school. And it works especially very well for girls. So when I'll talk about COVID, because COVID has become such a reality and top of mind issue now that I think any challenges we faced prior to COVID really do not seem very significant, at least right now. So imagine villages, imagine schools in villages. Most of our teachers also come from community. They are fully qualified, but they also come from villages around our school, around our schools. And third week of March and school closures are announced. Not many people may know, but in most of the states, March is when the final exams are going on, and from April 1st, the new academic year starts. Most of the students went back home without textbooks for the next academic year. The biggest challenge, it seems like a very small detail, but that was the biggest challenge that most of the educationists faced, that children were into homes without new books. The second challenge that we faced was our children came from backgrounds where technology is not a given. Our children will not have laptops at home. So in fact, I'm not conflicted, should I cover it here or in my remarks? In fact, we were very lucky that 75% of our children had a smartphone at home. It's a different issue that the same smartphone was being used by entire family, and if there were siblings, they were sharing it. So it wasn't available, to our students for synchronous classes. You cannot do online classes when you're not sure that a child would have access to phone at that point of time or not. And since unlock, parents started going out and they went out with their phones. So even the children who reported having a smartphone at home did not have it. So our biggest challenge was how do we make sure that our students, and 40,000 of them, stay connected with education. And this is a phrase I've used in many of my presentations now. At least I know in case of education, and I'm not only talking of Satyabhati schools, I know it's happened across the country, even in government schools. It is the passion which has drove technology. So our teachers who do not have laptops at home, they knew very basic functions of their phone. They started using their smartphones. They made WhatsApp groups class-wise. They started making little videos of themselves teaching. They would send those little videos to children. And you know what inspired me the most? And Paresh talked about challenges, and I just want to talk about this, and then I'll stop talking because the next set of remarks are also mine. 25% of the children, that's 10,000 children, did not have a smartphone. They only had simple phone with them. So each teacher would take, that kind of results in 7-8 children per teacher who didn't have a smartphone. Our teachers would either call them up one by one or call them up in group phone calls of 4-5 children, explain the concept over phone, give them some kind of assignment to do, and after 2-3 days, call up each child individually to listen to what the child has done and to re-explain the concept if they think the child has not understood. That's not technology's role. Technology was an aid, yes, but that was the passion of teachers which drove education on ground. So Paresh, I hope I've been able to answer your question, though I took a lot of time.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Let's give, the next speaker, please. You have your 5-8 minutes. Please tell us. Malika. Yeah.
Yes, I could, share my own insights on the challenges of implementing CSR strategies in Uzbekistan. Well, I'll try to be short and to the point. The first challenge is, lack of enough knowledge among businesses on CSR. What is CSR? Because currently they think it's just, additional expenditure, unnecessary expenditure. Second thing is, challenges on like transparency issues. Because, as I can see that, you know, there is a complex tax within the governmental system, and because of that complex tax, businesses are trying to hide their incomes, you know, trying to let's say keep their money in their offshore accounts. And well, with the situation with this, well, you cannot have the transparency, you know, proper transparency as required by the real corporate social responsibility requirements, right? And then another thing is compulsory responsibilities imposed by the authorities, by the government to the businesses, like, you know, they have to repair the roads, they have to, you know, financially help certain social organizations and etc. And it's all done because they have to do it. You know, it's not like they're willing to do it because of their own, let's say, willingness. So this could be, these are about, like, you know, short remarks on the challenges. But I'll talk about more, of course, in my presentation.
Sure. Malika, you come from a very young democracy. Why don't we start with your presentation? Is that okay with you?
Yeah, sure.
Please,
of course.
We can have the questions.
Yeah.
We can have the questions at the end of the session. Let's start with your presentation, and then we go on to every speaker with their presentation.
Okay. Well, you know, CSR. If we look at the CSR, what happened to CSR in the West, in the developed countries, we can see that CSR had kind of ups and downs within those societies and the governments, you know, because like from the beginning, it went from being celebrated as a victory, you know, kind of victory over greedy capitalism, to being blamed for becoming a kind of disgraceful shield for businesses to actually hide their, let's say, irresponsibilities, right? Or shield as that help companies to gain some kind of, let's say, undeserved legitimacy within the society they operate in. But we all know, of course, if we look at the true notion of corporate social responsibility, it is based on very important concepts like triple bottom line, people, 3 P's, right? Profit, people, and the planet. And it encourages, like true CSR should encourage businesses to practice their all 3 like responsibilities in all these 3 fields. And unfortunately for now, in West, I could see that, you know, CSR, like true meaning of CSR is a bit distorted. But luckily CSR in Uzbekistan, you know, it doesn't, it hasn't taken such a roller coaster, let's say, roller coaster ride in our country, right? And this could be due to the fact that, you know, like several principles of CSR are inherently ingrained in the culture, right? And the mentality of the people. And it's not just about Uzbekistan, it's about all countries of Central Asia, because we have more or less same culture, same traditions, and the history. And it's not actually a tool to improve the brands of the, like brand image of the companies as it is in Western countries. And though CSR is a new concept in Uzbekistan, which is not that good understood by the businesses, but you know, some, as I said, some elements and the principles are already practiced both by businesses and by people as well, actually, you know, but they have a bit like different, let's say, face, like in the forms of cultural values or in the forms of like personal humanly duties, be it the charity, be it helping other people, be it helping needy people, and etc. And well, when it comes to the CSR in Uzbekistan, what is happening actually currently in terms of CSR? Well, I could say that, you know, as I said, like it's been 5 years that I'm researching among businesses how they understand business, how they understand CSR, how they understand their responsibilities, and etc. And I could see that, you know, majority of businesses, they actually they implement certain elements of CSR, but they don't know that they are using, they're practicing their responsibilities. Those responsibilities include like, you know, caring about their employees, providing them with certain social packages. If they want to get education, certain, you know, some of the businesses, they pay for the education of their employees. And at the same time, as I said, they're, you know, they're practicing charities, they give out donations. Like, it's interesting that businesses are not trying to monetize, as I said earlier. It's not a tool for them to improve their positive image within the society, right? It's just, they do it because of the internal urge. However, unfortunately, as I can see that, you know, in Uzbekistan, social and financial duties, let's say responsibilities, override environmental responsibilities. And there's very weak accountability of environmental responsibilities of businesses. Of course, like there is some environmental tax that they pay yearly, annually, but it doesn't cover the harm that they are causing to the environment. And actually, we don't have you know, strict regulations on how businesses are doing in terms of environmental responsibilities. What is, you know, the damage that they're causing is not measured, it's not audited in a way it should be, you know, within CSR frames. But of course, we can understand that Uzbekistan is just, you know, emerging, and it has to develop economically, and it's more important to practice, you know, economic responsibilities. But we have to take into consideration that by not having strict regulations on the environmental responsibilities, well, we can have, you know, irreversible environmental disasters, right? And by the time that we got in there, it will be too late. And the one example can be the RLC, fourth biggest sea in the world. I think you all know about the, you know, this environmental disaster, which is caused by the irresponsible cotton practice, cotton production in Uzbekistan. Of course, it was inherited by the USSR, but unfortunately, you know, we continued producing cotton even after independence. And yes, like I can say that in terms of, you know, in terms of the reputation of Uzbekistan in the world, the cotton production really ruined the positive image of Uzbekistan. I can say that because, you know, maybe you've heard about the Cotton Pledge, which is signed by over 300 companies, because like Uzbekistan was accused on using forced labor and child labor. But we have like forced labor and child labor, yeah. But of course, it's been like 3 or 4 years. Uzbekistan is changing. The changes within, you know, with the new government, we have really good changes. We have like, you know, maybe you've heard that, maybe some of you read about the ILO's 2019 report on the cotton picking period in Uzbekistan. It confirmed that Uzbekistan no longer has child labor, and the forced labor is, you know, reduced to 40%, even if you compare it with the 2018 cotton picking. And the biggest achievement was actually that Uzbekistan abandoned the practice of the state cotton order, which happened in May 2020, this year. Actually, the state order was the main reason why, you know, authorities practiced forced labor, because they had to fill up certain, let's say, plans for the government. And government is really, new government is really trying to improve the positive image of Uzbekistan. And because of those steps, considerably important steps, you know, the US ban to Uzbek cotton was lifted But unfortunately, the cotton pledge is not lifted yet, but we are hoping, it will be, that we will hear good news by the end of this year.
Last 1 minute to sum
and
up,
then,
please.
yeah. So what I can sum up with the thing that, the voluntary social and environmental standards, international standards, like implementing those standards in Uzbekistan would really, really help, with the situation, with the overall CSR situation in Uzbekistan, and it will help also businesses to gain the reputation of the responsible suppliers in the world. And of course, Uzbekistan is learning, and I hope we will get there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Malika. It seems yeah, you are handling the challenges well. These are challenging times, but these are great opportunities which you have in Uzbek. On a lighter note, what you really need is Arpinder ji to open an office there. Then all the problems will be solved. Yeah. With that, we can go on to our next speaker, Richa ji. But before that, I would like to make an announcement. A very dear friend, Shri Prakash Ingole, the Joint Secretary, Government of Maharashtra, PWD Department, has just joined us. He's a very strong supporter of CASI. And I would also like to take this opportunity to thank him for participating in all our walkathons and marathons and drawing competitions with all the things that we do. Prakash Ingole ji, thank you very much for joining us today. Right. And, Mitesh.
Sir, he has some issues with his mic, so he'll be joining us again in the next event. And
Okay.
so over to the next speaker, please.
Okay. Richa ji, can we have some lines from you, please?
Thank you, Paresh, and thank you, Mehta, for inviting me to share a bit about my experience in the CSR and sustainability space. I'll just briefly share 2 points and won't elaborate much. We can discuss later on. For companies where there are no large foundations, we have speakers like Mamta and my fellow panelists from Vodafone, that they have large foundations. But for companies that do not have large foundations and the money is going from directly cost center, it typically makes sense that your CSR programs are aligned to your business value chain. Why I'm saying that is because if you want to stay long and you want to stay invested, you need to have your top management mind share. Arpit ji very rightly pointed out that if you want to see, your beneficiaries, that there's an impact within your beneficiaries, you need to involve your top management. And that will happen only if it is aligned to your business value chain. So in my brief experience, whether it is in telecom or pharmaceuticals or now with financial services, what we've tried to do is first understand what is the customer segment and how we can actually address their core needs. Just to give you an example, I remember in Tadacom, we were working on a skill development project. And at that particular time, we realized that there is a need for skilled manpower, rather I would say semi-skilled manpower for fiber optical slicer. So that was the job role that was given to us. And then our thing was, how can we meet in terms of training and development and recruit the right people actually who have the social needs also, and we at the same time able to fulfill certain requirements for the telecom sector. Now, given the CSR law very clearly states that you cannot really look at business benefits, so it's clear. But what you can do is at least align it. So telecom, being a telecom player, it makes sense to do a program on skill development which is aligned to telecom sector. So we trained youth coming from Dalit and Adivasi background under our affirmative action program. We trained them on telecom related trades, and we placed them with various suppliers. Now, what we were able to do is we were able to meet the need of our supply chain also, not just our supply chain, telecom supply chain. And we gave them opening that, you can place that at any of the companies, whether it is us or whether it is our competition also. Because largely agenda was how we can fulfill the requirements for the industry and how we can train the people from Adivasi sector. Similarly, for financial services also, at L&T, what we try to do is, develop a program where we are able to train rural women into financial literacy and more specific digital financial literacy. Again, coming to the background that, one of our core business is microfinance. And if you see our end customer is a rural women entrepreneur. Now, rural women entrepreneur, typically what happens while there is access to credit through a business function, but she doesn't know how to manage finances. She doesn't know various aspects of financial literacy. And in fact, during the demonetization phase, we are having a strong rural footprint. We saw that, rural communities were distressed, and we know that there was a cash crunch, and especially these women who did not know, what to do when cash is not there. Now, aligning it to the Digital India's mission that the PM has been promoting, and of course going towards the less cash economy, we conceptualized a Digital Sakhi program. Again, where we were able to take inputs from our business teams. We identified NGO partners who had expertise on financial inclusion and livelihood, and had strong experience in the rural areas. Conducted thorough due diligence with them. So not only CSR team did, we do an RFP. So RFP is sent, and those NGOs are shortlisted by a third-party agency. They come and make a pitch to us. After making a pitch, we select one NGO, then we do a field visit, and then we finalize the NGO partner to implement this program. So we took inputs from them also, and then we decided to implement the program. While implementing the program, another thing which I would like to share critical to CSR functions is that you need to continuously take feedback from your stakeholders, whether it is beneficiary with whom you are working, whether it is implementing partners, whether it is sarpanch who are there in the villages, or it is the business team, because then only it will be a long-term program. So we've tried to do that, and Digital Sakhi program, which has won last year 4 awards back-to-back, is basically successful because of the stakeholder inclusivity principle. And that's the key which I would like to state in this presentation. So whether it is your internal stakeholders or external stakeholders, involve them, map them, prioritize them, and then develop and conceptualize CSR program. Ensure that, especially when you don't have a foundation or you have smaller grants, ensure that it is aligned to your business expertise. Being a financial institution, it makes sense for us to do financial literacy, and more so digital financial literacy going forward. Similarly, for a pharmaceutical, it makes sense for us to do a healthcare project. Similarly, for telecom sector, for telecom player, it makes sense to do a telecom-based program or a digital-based program. I'm sure my fellow panelists from Vodafone would definitely talk about it. But that's how, from a long-term perspective, one stays in it, and one is able to see both the social impact perspective also, and also one is able to create a brand recall for your organization. And that's again, Paresh, like you again mentioned, how do we kind of look at a brand recall? It is only when you are saying invested for 3 to 5 years that one is able to do that. Towards the endline surveys, when we do actually conduct it after 3 years of intervention by a third party, we do ask, there is a set of questionnaires where we ask them that do beneficiary understand who's sponsoring the program? They of course know who's the implementing partner, because that's the grassroots partner. But it is important to know who's your sponsor for the program, and it is important for beneficiary also to understand the importance of the sponsor also. So that, again, a perception of the organization that it is not just an organization which is here to business, but it is an organization which is also there to do a goodwill activity, look at their progress also. So that's these are the 2 points I would like to mention: stakeholder inclusivity across this thing, and business alignment to your CSR programs wherever you don't have a large foundation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richa. We will have a few questions. I'm sure the panelists will have a few questions for you. We will come back to that later. Before we go on to our next speaker, Nilay ji, I would like to make an announcement. We have 2 strong supporters with us as audiences. Patrick is a dear friend. He's a European settled in China. He is a quiet observer, but I wanted to make an announcement for him. He does very good work for oil and gas companies and water displacement work. So thank you, Patrick, for being here. Thank you for being a part of the seminar. We are happy you are here, and please feel free to ask questions. My second name that I wanted to announce is Alpa Atani. She is a very strong supporter for CSR and sustainability. She works for the Consul General of Netherlands, and in fact they are in touch with all the companies from Netherlands and monitoring their CSR and sustainability. So thank you, Alpa, for making CSR mandatory of all the companies which come here, and thank you very much for being a part of CASI. So Nilay ji.
Thank you, Paresh, for inviting me for this discussions. And I agree with earlier panelists. All the people have said, Arpinder said that governance and the monitoring is right, then you can do the program. And you rightly start with that. The challenge has always brought opportunity. And that's work with us also. At Vodafone Idea Limited in India, Vodafone Foundations is a subsidiary of Vodafone Idea Limited. We always focus on the technology as a inbuilt system. So for all the program which you do, innovations and technology should be all the program. And that's a unique thing happened during the COVID. We work with the 5,000 schools across India, and a majority of the government school on small low income group. Teacher are teaching through digital technology, but there is no content available. Because we are prepared, we have around 10,000 contents created by teacher and with ourselves. And this online platform where teacher have their own lesson plan and can teach the children in the classroom or at the home through the mobile phone. It's worked well. And now every day, there's 27,000 teachers are taking classes at the different locations in different country, because we think through it 3 years back. Content should be there, capacity building of the teachers should be there, there is provision for scholarships should be there, and also the teachers should then create the content. So empower everybody who is teaching at the school, who can go to the portal, they can design your own classrooms contents, they can design your own lesson plan, and they can teach if the school is also not working. Like in case of the India, the disasters happen each day. Sometimes the cyclone, sometimes the flood, sometimes the COVID. So school is a phenomenon where it disturbs, and one is disturbed for a year or 6 months. It's difficult for especially the government school bring back the children in the school. So these are the things where every day around 5 lakhs people are coming to our websites, running it, and giving a wonderful exposure of the teacher capacity building. And now working from home also, it gives opportunity to interact more and more with them. So that's another opportunity. Second thing is that when we do anything in the CSR, you have to cater all the issue around those areas. Like one of the neglected areas in India is agriculture. Last year we choose to work in the agriculture, and we're working with 50,000 farmers in India. And there's a high risk in agriculture because farmers are not very prone, all rain-fed agriculture in India, and they're very prone to all the risk, either pest attack or the fertilizer use, wrong seeds, and they don't know about it. So we have started using the technology, where sensor-based, local weather stations, and empower the farmer. They should know what the risk is coming on. So like that, during that, there is a heavy rain in the Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh. So they know where to harvest because they have a precise information, and they know about what kind of seeds or pest control need to be take care of that. Because within the 1 day, with the sensor, they have the informations, they take the preventive actions. So when all the things, plant productions, fertilizers, weather conditions, pest control, productions, growth, and the value chain. So when you think through the programs where if you somebody, any community, whether it's a school or whether it's agriculture, it's connect with you, you cater at least the needs of those people. And that's worked well for us. Similarly, the financial inclusion, the earlier speaker was talking about, when we design a financial inclusion programs, we say that you teach them, you train them, but they forget it about it. Because 50% or 70% of the people who are working in organized sector, they don't have access. And there is no full-time trainer who can train them. So when we designed that programs, we created a mobile-based app where after the training, they can do a rehearsal. They can do a refresher course on their own as per their own convenience, and they can continue it. And it's working well because within 3 years, we cover 1.5 crore people in India and across different geography. So I think the programs is important, and it is a very difficult for people give a vocational education to them and engage them for sustainable livelihood. So we did that. We work with the organizations called Seva for agriculture.
Nilay, you're not audible. Hello. Nilay ji, you are not audible.
But sir, I think we may have lost him. So while we wait for him to join us back, you may want to start
Go
with
on
the
to the next speaker.
next speaker, please.
Yeah. We had some we had a few lines pending from Mamta ji, and so we go on to her after we go for the last speaker of the day. Let me introduce Chirag. Chirag is the last speaker for the day. He works. He's a fund manager. Works on impact investments. Chirag, are you there?
Yes, Paresh.
Yeah. I would also like to introduce you to Jaisal. He's a young fund manager from New York. He works very closely with us, our office in the CASI office in New York. So I'll make the introductions offline. So Jaisal, good to have you here.
Yes,
Chirag ji.
Paresh.
Thank you, Paresh. Thank you, Mitesh, for inviting me here. In terms of how we look at ESG, for many, ESG, the buck stops at CSR, but that's not all. That's a tiny portion of what we look at when it comes to companies. But while we are discussing CSR, for many companies, what we try to identify, what are the areas that the company focuses on CSR? How have they been identified? And is there an impact assessment done of those CSR programs or not? To our surprise, many of the corporates that we try to evaluate, many of them don't even meet that 2%. And when we ask them why is that 2% not met, the answer we get is they couldn't get good programs or good ideas for their investments. So we find that really silly, given that we are in need of trillions of dollars to meet our SDG goals. So overall, that kind of surprises us significantly. Within even CSR or within the ESG all-encompassing framework, governance is very, very important, because we think if there is no strong governance, the E and S will never be met. Even when it comes to CSR, we have seen many corporates kind of do a lot of greenwashing when it comes to their CSR programs. We have seen corporates donating to education institutions where people of the rich go. So is that that's not a good CSR according to us. So there are various complications. Sometimes we struggle with data in terms of what programs they have done, or how much spending they have done into various programs, the bifurcations. So there are issues when it comes to data for us to evaluate companies on broadly the ESG parameters that we look at. So hopefully with the SEBI regulations mandating companies to do detailed business responsibility reporting, if that gets implemented, that will solve a lot of problems for us and help us in an investor in a much better. When it comes to CSR falls according to us in the social framework. Apart from CSR, the social framework kind of was significantly neglected in terms of how the company takes care of its employees in terms of safety, health, and what are the payment terms in terms of there's a lot of skewness that we see. The top management gets multiple salaries of the average employee in the company. So that is, according to us, also an issue that is far more neglected in the corporate world. Environment, thankfully, to the regulations unfolding significantly, has been addressed, and especially by sectors that add to a lot of environmental problems. So that we are seeing good progress on that side. But when it comes to Indian corporates, if you see 15 out of 20 business groups will be family-owned kind of businesses. So there we kind of have a lot of issues, as Arpinder said in his remarks, that is the CSR program driven by just the promoter, or is there a framework and a committee set up to kind of look at those CSR programs? So those are the kind of conflict issues that we see at many of the corporate benefits and not been addressed rightfully. Many of the corporates, we see the ENS risk, the environment and social risk, not being incorporated in the enterprise risk management. So that is clearly tells you that how serious that corporate is in overall ESG in terms of following the sustainability practices. Companies are not benchmarking to the best global practices when it comes to ESG. There are corporates, like if you see the cement sector in India, they have been at a significant forefront when it comes to environment, given cement contributes about 8% of the global pollution. Indian companies have been far more better even as compared to the global companies when it comes to taking care of the environment. They have moved much beyond the traditional remit, much beyond the regulations that are required and have done their part. So we have seen a mixed bag, but more work needs to be done as far as Indian corporates are concerned on ESG. Many companies don't lack reporting, don't have a sustainability officer. Everything is driven by the promoter. There is opaqueness in the audit committees. We have seen the promoter remains an permanent invitee on the audit committees as well. So that kind of spells how strong governed these companies are, and therefore we think that if governance is not good, ENS will not be taken care of by that company. So there are challenges, but I think there is investor pressure on these companies to get their act together, and we are seeing regulations unfold to help these investors. So over next couple of years, we think that this space will get significantly better as regulations unfold. Investments, I think, has great power to transform corporate behavior, which we are seeing. Foreign investors that are coming into India are seeing India on a scale of emerging market economies is high on the ESG risk. And therefore, they are kind of making it mandatory for companies to showcase that they are strong at sustainability practices. And therefore, kind of pressuring companies to get out more data. And when companies have to reveal that data, they need to get their act together. So we're seeing a lot of greenwashing as well on the corporate side. But eventually, I think it is our job as fund managers to kind of identify what is black and what is white from the shades of gray that we see in the corporate world today. So hopefully the ESG investing is only about to go significantly better from here. Indian corporates will kind of, by the push of investors and regulations, get a lot more better on sustainability practices and reveal us a lot of data. And given in this world that we live in, where we are attached with social media significantly, any bad practices or greenwashing will not stay hidden for a long time. So hopefully the combination of all three will deliver that triple bottom line that we are talking about. So with that, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Chirag. Mamta ji, you wanted to add a few lines, please. Please tell us.
Thank you, Paresh. This has been such a good panel, and I see that we have crossed the time that we had planned. So I'll make just some remarks for 2-3 minutes. These are very challenging times, and although Bharti Foundation is a trust, we're actually the philanthropic arm of Bharti Group, and our companies and many other corporates, they partner us in implementing their CSR programs. Arpinder, EY, that audits us very regularly. And I do agree with some of the issues all the speakers raised. But I think for me, last 5-6 months, I mean, these challenging times of COVID, how I have seen the CSR space respond to it has been really very awe-inspiring. I mean, I've been amazed at the way, and I'm part of many CSR professional WhatsApp groups, and I'm amazed at the way CSR professionals have responded to it. And I saw 3 shifts happening. So first one was to ensure program continuation, business as much business as usual. And I'm seeing it from the lens of our own programs as well. One evaluated risk, saw the kind of role technology can play, and I saw CSR professionals struggling, planning to make sure that their program reach the beneficiaries to the extent that it can. The second shift I saw was the adaptation to new technology. So the risk mitigation exercises, I've been part of discussions where CSR professionals were looking at how to modify their program design. In my own programmatic concept, I saw the speed at which technology got adapted at the ground level was an eye opener for me. And the third shift that I saw was, I saw corporate houses creating programs around COVID. I mean, that inspired me, the speed at which the programs got designed, and most of the CSR professionals, they rose up to the challenge, of COVID. Three things held this entire movement together, and these three things were flexibility, technology, and empathy. I saw these three things. Even if I see the teachers in Bharti schools, the way they adapted technology, the way they adapted teaching in an asynchronous manner. And I have such wonderful stories of our teachers making sure that if some parent does not have grain in the house, she called up the sarpanch, head of the village, to make sure that grains get delivered. And these are three, if I may call them, value systems I've seen emerging across: flexibility, technology, and empathy. And I think that has, I believe that India has a very thriving civil society. I think CSR professionals matched its step, and we've seen excellent work happening on the ground. And some of it has been shared by speakers before me. And I think somewhere these three pillars helped us achieve that. Thank you, Paresh.
Paresh sir, you're on mute.
Sorry, we can't hear you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mamta ji. I'll definitely use that in my next speech. Flexibility, empathy, and adapting technology. That is a that is a very nice way to spell out the entire thing. We have time for 2 or 3 questions. Patrick, Alpaji, do you have any questions, please?
Yeah, okay. Happy to. Probably know by now, I'm thinking a lot about the complexity of these issues, and I think a lot of the speakers have mentioned like ghost programs, greenwashing, lack of regulations, and all these. There's a lot of different challenges that are impacting the performance that we want. And if I frame that within complexity, say that complexity is part of that problem, my question is what are the things we can do to reduce that complexity, to get more clarity, to understand what is really going on, whatever program it might be or corporation's performance. So it's a very kind of open question, but any kind of any information about that is something I'm very interested in.
Arpinder ji, would you like to take that?
It's such a difficult question.
It's a very difficult question, actually, what Patrick asked with the whole complexity. I think the basics are important, Patrick, in the sense I find, obviously there are a lot of complicated political pressures, for instance, other things which you can't control to that extent. But there are a few things in your control, start with the basics around having a CSR policy, having the basics around some monitoring, be clear that there's a committee which is deciding it rather than a one-off promoter deciding on a particular program. Those things are in your control. Now, there's some things not in your control. You have a factory in a remote location and somebody, some politician approaches you, says you have to donate a particular fund to a particular CSR fund managed by somebody's wife or somebody's daughter, Those are things which are much trickier, which I would recommend you should escalate up in your organization. Everybody on this panel works in large organizations. I always believe in consultation. When you're not comfortable, escalate the issue, but make sure the framework is right. I actually feel, Patrick, a lot of the CSR programs, the frameworks are questionable and not there. So to your point, it's very complex on the political side, etc. But before we get there, at least fix the basics. I think in India, there's so many low-hanging fruits. You fix those, things will get better. And then you get to the more complicated issues, which I do think require government interaction, etc., which can't be resolved, just in an isolated manner at a corporate. But that's my view. Would love to hear the panelists' view on other things.
Patrick, we do a lot of work on the sustainability front because when we started CASI, it was more about sustainability and less about CSR. And when we arrived in Asia, then it was more about CSR and less about sustainability. So when you're talking about complexities in the manufacturing environment, then you're not talking about a simple baseline reporting. You're talking about things which are much more complex than that, because when you want to do away with the nuisances of non-sustainability in a manufacturing environment, there are certain aspects which are beyond your control, as in technology. So, or a simple thing of using alternate materials. And if the company does not have the technology to use alternate materials, then that's a no-go. So in a highly complex scenario of sustainability, my suggestion would be to start with a common listing on an ESG exchange, because once you conform to the cause, once you join the army, you learn marching. So you don't need to march before you join the army. You need to commit to the cause.
Professions. So that bit, and also for the board. So that is one thing. Second is also to have professionals who understand the ground realities. So from a CSR perspective, they understand the development sector well, and they also understand the business well, and they're able to conceptualize programs that are aligned to business as well as create the necessary impact. So I think that's where, again, we need to have educational institutes. You cannot have just a social work profession implementing CSR, but who doesn't understand from a business point of view. I mean, you can, of course, if you have large foundation, you can go the philanthropic way. I'm no one to say that, philanthropy has its own importance. But if it is, again, if you have limited budget and, again, you are directly deriving it from a certain cost center, it will make sense for us to understand business as well very clearly, and then only you present the business case to top management, and then you get okay, yeah, I'm ready to stay invested. It will not be a one-year program. I will stay invested 3 to 5 years. So these are certain critical things that I think we need to see to it that we have the right professions, CSR sustainability professionals, so education of them in the right manner, maybe have those courses where you can have both management and social work. And second thing is capacity building right from top to bottom and with the business team. So that's, I think, where advisory, organizations, and I think the Big Four are already doing it, but certain other organizations like CASI and all can do, because you do have a large base and all. So that's what I feel.
Thank you very much. Can I move on to the last question of the day? So I have a specific question, and I think Arpinder ji would be the right person to give an answer. But please feel free to contribute. Everybody, please feel free to contribute. I'm trying to move on to the next level from CSR and foundations and the CSR issues on to the next level where we get to the board. So the question is, at a board level, I need your comments on integrating ethics into CSR.
It's a great question, actually, because I do attend a lot of board meetings, and CSR, I don't think gets enough time or space at a board meeting, at least in India, that I can tell you. I think you discuss business, as was mentioned earlier by Richa, and you discuss a lot of factors. I think it's very important to remind boards about their responsibility, especially under the Companies Act. And that is one way. To be honest, unfortunately, Paresh, in India, people only do it when they're afraid. So if they're afraid that they are responsible for CSR, I think when there was a point of time when for 1 year there was confusion that there was criminal liability on the board or management if you did not meet that 2% requirement, suddenly everybody was running around. Then the government said, okay, we'll give a leeway around the criminal liability. Suddenly there was, but I think unfortunately we are a little reactive as a board, and I think it's very important to increase the awareness. Obviously, now when we do audits generally around risk functions, we are raising CSR to the board. So the good part is most auditors, whether it's EY or any other firm, is raising the CSR agenda at the board because it is a compliance requirement. So I think it is coming to the board level. I think with the help of CSR heads who are on this thing, if we keep increasing the profile, if it becomes a board agenda, the budget constraints you're referring to, the governance you're referring to, all of that gets simpler to deal with. It has to be a board agenda, which today I don't think it is.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you very much, Arpinder, for that answer. That if you remember, when we started today's session, I said we will get some executable advice. This is executable advice. So thank you very much from all of us. Mitesh?
Sir, I have one question if we have some time.
Please.
The last question that you raised, I would love to hear Chirag's view on that. Being a senior fund manager, I'm sure they also look at many different parameters when they track the corporates and put them in a graph. So I would love to hear his views on that question.
Yeah, sure, Mitesh. It still remains, like Arpinder said, tick the box kind of approach by many of the corporates. Given that it is a compulsion, they have to do it. But there is, it's also driven, like what Richa said, we have seen corporates telling us upfront that I cannot make a business case out of it, and therefore it will not go through. So there has to be a change in mindset somewhere. And as Arpinder said, if it gets elevated to the board level, the entire CSR or the ESG agenda at the board level, I think that will make a big difference in how corporates look at it and how they evaluate and go and implement it. So yeah, there has to be some change in mindset, and I think the way we investors are trying to push that agenda overall, I think things will get much better going forward.
Thanks. I have one last question for Malika. So Malika, you've seen in India so many years, and now this is where we are. So you being from Uzbekistan, so what are the main challenges that you are facing when you talk to corporates and try to make them understand what CSR is and try to make them work on CSR front?
Sorry, Mitesh, this is Mamta. I really have to go. May I please leave? I had a hard close
yes, please. Thanks for
joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, Mitesh, coming to your question. If you remember at the beginning of the session, it was the Paresh question was a bit same to yours. What are the challenges on implementing CSR strategies? So I can talk about, like I talked about, the transparency issues that we have, and then we have lack of understanding, true understanding what is corporate social responsibility. We have, let's say, complementary duties imposed by the government, by the authorities to businesses. And all of these, of course, when you talk about CSR and responsibilities with businesses, they're immediately like, how to put it, in a right way, like they don't like it because they say we already have so many problems. Why then we have to engage in, in those kind of responsibilities? Of course, it's because they all of this happens because they don't have proper knowledge about what is CSR and what it can give to them. Because with the proper strategies on CSR, they could, of course, first of all, improve their image within society, and then they could be known as responsible suppliers, when it comes like, for example, for textile businesses, let's say. And the only thing, what I'm coming across is the only, let's say, attraction to businesses to be engaged in CSR and sustainability is, you know, to tell them that actually by engaging CSR, you will get more profits. You know,
correct. See, Malika, we were facing a similar issue when a few years back when Modi ji also started CSR. So a lot of companies, you know, we were facing exactly the same issue that you are facing, but people around the panel have been through that, and we can tell you from your from our experience that you know, you and your country will emerge as a winner because finally CSR works. So now this panel, everybody on this panel has been through that similar pain, similar issues, similar queries. When around 10 years back, 9 years back, you know, we enforced the CSR. So we understand exactly what you are going through, and you can learn from our experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you because, you know, as you are like majority of you, I think, are in India and, you know, working with this in this field. And do you think, you know, companies in India are already doing, you know, relatively good in terms of CSR, in terms of, you know, practicing their responsibilities, because they understand that it attracts, like ECG reports, for example, they produce them because they understand that it will attract investors, or because it is required by the legislation that you have. So what is actually encouraging businesses, you know, to plunge into the CSR and, you know, to practice their responsibilities? What is the main reason?
Oh, there are three things which encourage business in India. One foremost, before the you know, even before the law came in, Indians since ancient ages have believed in donations. Yeah, so it's a very Indian culture to donate, right?
Yeah,
so that yeah, so that
but
works for us. The law works for us. There are companies like Infosys. You know, there are companies like Infosys who are doing an excellent job in ESG reporting, CSR, sustainability. The others are catching up. There are smaller companies now catching up, primarily because of the law. Second, they were already doing some good. And third, more importantly, now companies are realizing that they benefit by you know, reaching out to the communities that they serve. So they are looking at the benefit. So we are getting there. And because your question
We have last 1 minute.
the word relativity, how are we doing relative? Yeah. So thank you very much. Thank you. Uh, thank you, Arpinder ji. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you so much.
Mitesh. Thank you
to share our insights. Thank you
very much.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.